Another day of training camp in the books for the Carolina Panthers. You guys already know we're here to get you caught up. Let's go.
Brace yourself for the ultimate Carolina Panthers experience. Welcome to Two Growls, One Roar, the podcast that hits harder than a Luke Kuechly tackle. We're diving deep into the heart of Panther Nation, bringing you unrivaled passion, insider takes, and pure gridiron fire. From Wilmington to the cosmos, this is your home for the fiercest football talk east or west of Charlotte.
Welcome in, folks, to another edition of the Two Growls, One Roar podcast. If you're listening out there on Apple or Spotify, please take 2 seconds and give us a 5-star rating as we continue to just make ourselves known in the market. It's much appreciated. Although I will tell you, I did have an interaction with someone on X today that follows me. He's going back and forth for whatever. It said he did not know me. So just take that for what it is. But we are going to get you guys caught up. And of course, if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. But we're going to get you caught up on all things Panthers. Now, today, no fights. Maybe that's good news. That's bad news. We did get to hear after practice from Wallace. Kind of both sides now to the story. It's not really a thing. Hearing that Trevin Wallace, though, spending some time talking to Luke Kuechly. Why not? Also still pretty close to Shaq Thompson. I still raise my hand in saying that, yes, I get the business decision for the Carolina Panthers not to bring back Shaq, given the nature of just the injury. But at the same time, they were the one that was closest to him. They knew about his recovery. They had an opportunity. I mean, if you knew as the Carolina Panthers that Josie Jewell was in the state he was, you kind of sit back and say, okay, so what's the backup? How are we going to get there? They chose not to do it. Maybe they were banking on the fact that they thought Josie Jewell would make a recovery, but he didn't. We get it. It's all business. That's where this thing sits. I'll tell you, though, listening to Trevin Wallace, we're hearing a lot of positive reviews, and I'll be the first to tell you I am one of the harder folks on him. You think about him, though, and how young he is, and he is younger than some of the not second year, but some of the first-year guys that are here, and he's like, a year or two younger than those guys and giving them direction and telling them what to do as he leads the linebacker room. So I think we got to put that into perspective. I also think, as I talked about him not having the green dot, that, maybe that's a good thing. As he gets his feet underneath him, we know about him being thrown to the fire last year. It's not necessarily a bad thing, in my opinion, that he can play a little more free. And if he doesn't have to focus on calling the defense right now, we know he can work his way into it and get his feet underneath him, figure this thing out, and then maybe in a year or two, he'll be ready to take the reins of this thing over. But I'll tell you, though, it seems like he's getting some pretty good reviews. We're going to talk about all the other reviews, but no fights. Of course, heard from Canales and A'Shawn Robinson. And while we talk about A'Shawn Robinson, I posted, and this was what actually set it off with whoever the dude was on X, but I posted a clip of A'Shawn Robinson, and it was Darren Gant of Panthers.com was asking a question about, what was it like in the offseason not playing, not getting into the playoffs, and he just talked about how frustrated and angry he was not to be in the playoffs, which we want. And something that was a little insightful was, like, he had the same view that a lot of us did in regards to the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, and two teams that made it to the Super Bowl, and how the Carolina Panthers played both of those teams closely, and they just didn't execute down the stretch. And sure, winning those two games doesn't put you in the playoffs if you're the Carolina Panthers. But if you do execute and you do, get over the hump in some of those, it does give you a few extra wins. And that's some of the things that we want to capitalize on heading into this season. But I think it's just, to me, the nature of where the Carolina Panthers are is they build this new culture that they're trying to get to, player-led, all those things. Gone are the years of hearing about collaboration, at least for the moment, I hope, all the talks that we had around collaboration. Let's go ahead and get this thing running, folks. Let's talk through transaction. It is early in training camp, but we do continue to see transactions. And today, no different for the Carolina Panthers with Jasim Reed, who is played for San Diego FCS program, had a solid season last year, 1,000 yards, a little over 70 catches, 12 touchdowns, offensive player of the league for the Pioneer Football League, FCS league where they were in. Carolina Panthers released Dan Chisena. So here's the state of, and we've talked about this, but the state of where you are and how healthy you are going into this. Of course, we know Tommy Tremble. Like when you start stacking injuries, like of course the Carolina Panthers are not going to do anything with Tommy Tremble. Like he is a contributing starter for the Panthers. But when you get into these practice squad players that are, on the cusp, you really need bodies and you need to get looks, and not only just for like the wide receiver position or whatever position they play, but for special teams, for everything else, you just want to know. In the event, it may not be for now, but down the road, getting into the season, or if this guy does make the practice squad, whatever it is, that you've got a good look and you got an idea. Same thing with the kickers. That's why you have this battle in the event that something doesn't go well. You're like, oh, well, we'll call Matthew Wright or we'll call Fitzgerald, whatever it is. But if you're a receiver and a player that is practice squad or borderline, not really close to making the roster, missing time hurts. And when you're injured and you're not out there, you can't showcase anything. I mean, dude, this isn't NFL standards. We just sat in high school football meeting. Last night, high school football coach for our oldest, talking about missing time and what happens when you miss time, whether it's a result of an injury, whether it's you having an appointment. If you're not on the field, especially in this early part, if you're not on the field, the coaches can evaluate you. If you don't get your practices in, it's different because it's high school, but then you can't play in the scrimmages and you can't play in the first game, and those things stack up, and then you're just behind. It's no different, though, when you think about college, the NFL, because it's going to be next guy up. So somebody else is going to get an opportunity. And for the Panthers in this case, they decided, hey, it's probably a good time for us to go ahead and bring someone else in. So they do get a look at Reed, who was in earlier part of the year. At least that's what Joe Person reported, that he was one of the undrafted free agents that they brought in. Now, the undrafted free agent list for the Carolina Panthers, and I'm looking at it here, I actually don't see Reed on here, so maybe it was a workout. But on Panthers.com, out of the list of 19 undrafted free agents, he was not one of those. So I'm guessing he was then brought in for a workout. So that's the state of it. We are going to get into some injury news that happened today to get you guys up to speed that could impact someone on the Carolina Panthers, an offensive lineman. Same scenario, not apples to apples, but we know how this goes. So let's keep this rolling like we've been doing and talk to this a little bit. Let's go ahead and throw this one up there for you guys. Talking through the latest with camp, the Canales doctrine. Coach Canales is instilling a clear, comprehensive philosophy, more than just plays on the field, strategic approach to building a resilient, competitive, intelligent football program. Yeah, I mean, the intensity there with where the Carolina Panthers are. So balancing these high contact practices with recovery days. Again, you want to ensure that players are conditioned for week one, but you also want to ensure that they're not burned out. Talk about that player-centric health, individualized injury management. We know, relatively speaking, the Carolina Panthers pretty healthy right now. Building this identity of who this team is going to be, competitive, physical, aggressive. Talks about, nobody wants to play the Panthers, or nobody will want to play the Panthers. I'm curious to see. We've seen really good pieces of ETN, Dowdle. We know about Chuba Hubbard. How much are they going to rely on the backs that they have here? And, of course, valuing the versatility, that's a consistent theme as we talk about players that can contribute more, playing different spots, getting on the field and making the most of their opportunities. Now, speaking of opportunities, as I mentioned, Most notably is Chandler Zavala, who sustained a patella tendon injury. He's expected to miss a few weeks with a return, hopefully before the preseason ends. So the benefit, though, of where he is now, I mean, you're not going to have to put him on IR or anything like that. You don't have to get into managing the roster, but it does impact the decision because it is next man up. And Dave Canales talked about the opportunity again. Chandler Zavala playing the guard position. So we know, and as Dave Canales mentioned, and we all know that Brady Christensen is a Swiss Army knife. He really can play any position across the offensive line. So he, of course, gets some more looks. But he did bring out two guys in particular. So Jarrett Kingston and Jair Carter. Two guys that we haven't talked a lot about, but we did talk about during our preview of the Carolina Panthers 90-man roster. So important to note that, again, as you have injuries occurring on the team, on the field, which is always unfortunate, but it's the nature of where this is, who's coming up, who's taking over the load, the reps, and all the things that go with that. For a managed workload, of course, Derrick Brown working through some soreness. I mean, general soreness, like no, I don't think there's a concern there. And then, of course, we already talked about Bobby Brown, the third, his return, and Sam Martin. Now, we're going to talk through some highlights. Speaking of guys being out, you do have guys like J.C. Horn, Mike Jackson, of course, getting some veteran days now, time off, and exactly what this means for the group of guys behind them. And so let's go back for you guys that are out here watching. It's a little bit harder to see. Maybe we can zoom in on this side a little bit. There we go. So building that front defensive line is a big part of why we think the Carolina Panthers are going to be more successful this season. We've gotten positive news from our conversation around Ashawn Robinson talking about Derrick Brown. He demands, speaking of Brown, he demands a lot and it frees up a lot for others. We got the same piece with Trevin Wallace talking about the benefit of having Derrick Brown on the defensive line and what he can take on and what he can do from his position. I mean, being able to get that strong pass rush in addition to what we're going to have on the outside with the outside the linebackers is going to be a big piece and reason why hopefully the Carolina Panthers are more successful. Now, I did talk about this graphics a little bit weird because it's highlighting cornerbacks and then at the top it's talking about linebackers, but we can discuss both. So you do have, again, just weigh the nature of where this fell, which we talked about, and maybe I can just take it off because it's not really that important to look at. I can talk to you guys what I'm trying to say here for those that are following along visually. But speaking of Trevin Wallace, again, I kind of highlighted my thoughts around him. He's playing faster, not thinking as much. I think all those are good things. Getting back to the football that he played at the University of Kentucky, like that's one of the things that Canales emphasized. And I do think, like we said, when it comes to playing football at any level and or in the NFL, being able to play football and not think is important. As soon as you start thinking, where am I supposed to be? Where am I supposed to line up? All those things, it'll mess with you. Now you do need to be smart. You got to understand the play call, what you're supposed to be doing, but it needs to be second nature from your instincts and what you should be like executing on and like what you're good at. So I'm excited about that. Now, defensive backs, of course, Mike Jackson, J.C. Horn, Shaw Smith-Wade, feel good about that. Those three. I told you early on in the cornerback preview video that we did, Bartholomew, Shemar Bartholomew is a name to watch, and we continue to see his name popping up in clips, popping up in comments from folks online. I do think, if you're penciling in folks on your 53-man roster, I would put his name on there right now for the defensive back for cornerbacks, like thinking like, okay, maybe we're going to see something out of this. Of course, in addition to that, although I'm not as high on him, but just so you can get the balance of who's getting what reps. Corey Thornton as another one that is in the mix as well. So we've got a lot of battles happening as we speak right now. We'll continue to monitor those. And Corey Thornton was or is undrafted free agent. So I got to tell you, man, when you think about the Carolina Panthers, where they are today, the potential for what they could do and what the front office can do, being able to hit on some of these picks, like it's big, man. It's big for building the foundation. Again, I do think we're going to see a better football team this year. I don't know how you can regress on the defensive side of the ball. Pairing that with an offense that's figuring it out, they should be in a lot of games. And I think really building a very strong foundation for next year, because then, like, I don't want to get too far into next year, but we are talking, if you lock down your wide receivers, you got your running backs in check. Yeah, offensive line, you're going to need a tackle, right tackle. Center should be secure. Guards, you feel good. Left tackle. I mean, now you are in I don't know, man, JT Sanders too, and potentially Mitchell Evans, like tight end position. I mean, you're putting yourself in a place to really start to bring in good football players, supplemental pieces, playmakers around you, some of that top tier talent, either through the draft or free agency. But you've established the foundation, and now you can build on it. And now you're building in pieces that can contribute very successfully to help build out from there. So I'm excited about that and what that can mean for the Panthers. And let me go back to the notes that we had. I believe that yeah, let's go back. Actually, there's honestly not. I was cycling through what we had as far as notes for the offense. There's not too much to highlight on the offensive side of the ball. We did see some highlights from Jimmy Horn. So Jimmy Horn Jr.'s having a pretty solid camp as well. I think a lot of folks wonder, because we haven't heard a lot out of Jalen Coker. I'm not concerned right now, again, and I think the Carolina Panthers being in the position they are to have potentially 7 wide receivers like on the roster. Now, once we carry that many, if we do, I mean, you're really only putting 2 to 3 out there at once. So as far as reps and things like that and splitting things up, like it's going to be different. So I'm excited to see what it looks like in the preseason. But the stock in Hunter Renfrow and Xavier and Tedero McMillan, I mean, honestly, all these guys, we also haven't heard a lot about Adam Thielen. And I think that's just the nature of what's being reported is a lot of the newness that's there. And so Jalen Coker kind of falling back a little bit as far as like what we're hearing. Last year, he was a hot topic, undrafted free agent. And it's just the nature of like what we're seeing. We don't have fans in attendance, so it's limited to what we can see, what's being shared, and like how we digest it and get that information out there. So anyways, folks, as we conclude, I do think that is going to be all for today's episode. Oh, I did have one other thing that stuck out to me, and the Trevin Wallace presser. He talked about Josie Jewell. So for me, I'm somewhat curious if Josie Jewell is still around and helping, potentially teaching, coaching. Like, I don't know, but Trevin Wallace specifically said he had Josie Jewell on the side if you go back and listen to his presser. So to me, I'm just wondering, like, how involved is he? Like, if he is there and helping, and like, I'm all for all of that. So like, I think it's good in the event that Jewell figures this thing out and actually have him integrated in there. We'll see. So anyways, yeah, and guys, I'm recording this. This is what I get for doing it this way. But like I said, kicking competition still up and down. I literally cannot remember if I told you that. So that's what I get. And if I did just tell you that, you can tell me and you can say you're an idiot. That's cool too. Always appreciate it. As always, folks, you guys are awesome. It's Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.